Ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. Lithuania found itself at the center of a geopolitical riddle this week when what appears to be a Russian UAV crash-landed inside its territory. Initial reports were confused. Was it a model aircraft, a home-built drone, or something more sinister? Now, it wasn't a missile, but it could have been. It wasn't a Shahed, but it also fooled everyone like one. Last week, a piece of plywood and polystyrene shook the nerves of a NATO member. Welcome to the new rules of aerial warfare, where even decoys can trigger real consequences. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
The Lithuanian military is investigating an airspace violation after an unidentified flying object crashed near the country's southeastern border with Belarus. Officials have denied earlier reports claiming the object was a Shahed drone.
This object doesn't pose any problems. It is not a drone and has been reported in the public domain. This is a product of foam and wood. It is shaped like a small aircraft. The reasons for its use are unknown to us, as is its possible purpose.
Despite posing no direct threat, the incident prompted swift emergency action, with country officials evacuated to bomb shelters. Air policing NATO fighters were also routed to the area.
I truly believe that we should not panic about what has happened, but it is up to all the institutions to understand how we will defend our border.
Border officials noted that similar drones are often used to smuggle cigarettes from Belarus, sometimes even using helium balloons. However, the military has not ruled out other possibilities, including the use of the object for intelligence gathering purposes or as a test for Lithuanian air defenses.
And now let's zone in on the east-planning portion of our show. A drone which breached Lithuanian airspace on July 16th has NATO on edge, with local authorities initially suspecting it was Russian. Since the war in Ukraine began, such incidents have raised concerns about security and escalation. Here's what you need to know in just 1 minute.
On Wednesday, Lithuanian border guards neutralized a drone crossing from Belarus just 4 kilometers from the border. Initially suspected to be a Russian Shahed, it was likely a smuggling craft carrying cigarettes, a common tactic in the region. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Lithuania has faced repeated drone violations, mostly from Belarus, a Russian ally. In 2024, similar incidents spiked, with 30 drones seized by Lithuanian border guards for smuggling contraband like cigarettes from Belarus. Experts warn some incursions may be Russian tests of NATO's response, while others are tied to illicit trade. Similar incidents have occurred in nearby Poland and Romania, highlighting the risk of spillover from the war in Ukraine. Lithuania and other Western NATO allies are beefing up border security, but these violations underscore the tense standoff in Eastern Europe as the war in Ukraine rages on.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. So to understand why this crash matters, we need to understand what the Gerbera is. First detected over Ukraine last year, it's a low-cost drone that mimics the much-feared Shahed 136 attack drones. Now, they share a similar silhouette and engine noise, and that's exactly the point. Gerbera drones are designed to exhaust air defense systems, force missile launches on false targets, and create panic without payloads, though some models can carry up to 5 kilograms of explosives. So did Lithuania just experience a benign decoy test, or was this a probing intrusion, a Kremlin-engineered stress test on NATO's response time? Well, that's where things get a little fuzzy. According to Lithuanian military sources, the drone might have gone off course during Russian live-fire exercises, or maybe it was on a reconnaissance mission, or maybe, just maybe, it was sent to measure Lithuania's reaction time. The drone crashed, that's it, but here's the uncomfortable reality. It could have been carrying a bomb. According to Ukrainian intelligence, some Gerberas have been retrofitted into kamikaze drones, albeit with smaller payloads than their Shahed cousins. Now that's why Ukraine still shoots them down, decoy or not. You don't take chances like that in a war. And yet Lithuania did. Not out of laziness or negligence, but because the country, like many others, is still kind of navigating the delicate space between peacetime rules and wartime realities. Seems fair, but to the average Lithuanian watching that drone fall out of the sky, the message may not have been obvious from the start. Now, the public backlash was swift. Critics accused Lithuania of failing to recognize a real threat, of reacting too slowly, of learning nothing from similar past incidents, like the Shahed drone crash in Latvia last year. Now, there too, NATO was criticized for a sluggish response. A Lithuanian drone expert fighting in Ukraine said, quote, "You can't tell what's inside just by looking at it." And that's the terrifying truth of modern warfare. The line between toy and threat, between test and attack, is now paper thin. So how should the Baltics respond? Well, Ukraine's strategy offers one answer: to overwhelm the drones electronically. Anatoly Hrachinsky, a former Ukrainian Air Force officer, advocates for electromagnetic warfare. Scramble their GPS, jam their signals, blind them before they hit. He also calls for mobile strike teams to hunt down drones in real time, but that requires investment as well as coordination. Because this isn't just a Lithuanian problem. Russian drones, real and decoy, have crossed into Poland, Romania, Moldova, and even Belarus. Every crash is a message, and every moment of indecision can be read and exploited by Moscow. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Piotr Szymański, Senior Fellow at the Security and Defense Department and Center for Eastern Studies. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So today we're taking a look at the drone situation, and well, my question is, how vulnerable actually are NATO's eastern borders when it comes to these sort of low-cost incursions?
I mean, it is impossible to protect the entire airspace of NATO, and each country faces several dilemmas in that respect. Of course, it is a cost issue, so to what extent we are willing to shut down a missile or a drone or an unidentified object which is crossing our border with a very costly system and our counter missile. And we need some time for identification, like in the case of Lithuania recently. So we have to firstly know what type of item is that actually. Is it just for smuggling? Is it a part of exercise conducted by Russia and Belarus, and for practicing to shut down such aerial vehicle? So it is without payload or with a payload. And of course, in the case of Lithuania, they weren't able to exclude that it is potentially a Russian Shahed drone. We saw several cases of drones entering NATO's airspace in Romania, in Poland, in Latvia. So this is something which we should take care of, definitely. But in the case of Lithuania, it was managed by the border guard and air surveillance systems. So they identified the object and actually noticed that it is going down and poses no further danger for the population. But of course, there are systems in place in the Baltic states to handle that. I mean, there is the Baltic Air Policing mission ensured by NATO, so there are fighter jets deployed permanently in Estonia and Lithuania. This round is being managed by Poland, for instance, in Lithuania with F-16s. So these machines were not at the scramble mode because of that drone, but they were notified and ready to go. And of course, Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia likewise, they are investing in their own ground-based air defense systems. So this very short range, like Polish-made Grom unpacks procured by Lithuania, And this short or medium range systems, in terms of short range systems, Lithuania operates US Norwegian system NASAMS. So they are capable of taking such an item down.
All right, now the way I'm seeing this is perhaps a lot of these air defense missiles are actually more expensive than the bogeys that Russia or whichever threat can throw at it. Do you think that this exposes a problem with these type of decoy drones being so strategically valuable because of the disproportionality of the costs?
I mean, it is, of course, this cost ratio issue, and you can, of course, procure drones more easily. You see how important the drone warfare has become in Ukraine for many, many months already, that we produce as Ukrainian allies, and Russia produces and procures drones from other countries. So we will face these types of incursions, and we cannot exclude that Russia or Belarus will use drones deliberately to test responses of NATO countries and test our situational awareness and surveillance systems, and test our responses of air defense military systems. Are we ready to down such a drone, or we will just escort it, or how we will handle that? It is an interesting legal issue as well, because some of the NATO eastern flank countries are only recently updating their national legislation, because there is no wartime or any kind of exceptional legal circumstances. So it is yet an additional question to what extent military is allowed to shut down a missile, a drone, and an item in air, which is flying towards the border or is at the border in a peacetime.
It's actually very interesting how one drone has essentially opened a whole can of worms. I could just mention earlier, there's a lot of process before even dealing with the drones, with a lot of intel gathering, what is its payload like, what's being carried, and how it's moving. A lot of resources is just dedicated into figuring out the information. And then we have logistic issue, and like you mentioned, also legality issues. Do you think that this might actually open up the conversation in the future about how to deal with these sort of threats coming in within the borders?
I mean, we are in a constant debate in each country how to react in the best possible way. You have to take into account as well the population. So where is actually the best place to shut such an item down? And debris which will fall, it depends on, of course, unmanned vehicle or missile. So there are different types of considerations here. But if you look at NATO priorities, air defense has been number one for many, many years. And there are investments in air defense all around NATO. And we see that NATO countries, some NATO allies, will finance now the procurement of Patriot systems for Ukraine. So we see that there is certainly a lack of capabilities, especially in this medium range systems in many countries, but we will invest a lot over the next years in our air defense systems and radars, sensors to detect any potential danger from these kind of weapons.
So from what I'm getting is that this does sound like focusing primarily on defense is going to put some countries in the back foot with all the complication and the disproportionality of the resources being dedicated to it. Do you think that we are looking at a future where perhaps the argument of peace through strength is even more prominent, seeing that perhaps a stronger, more aggressive posture, if you will, is something that perhaps is a better deterrence than simply having defensive weapons or defensive equipment that is very, very expensive to fire?
I mean, of course, it is very expensive, and we are preparing this type of equipment for a wartime, but there are certainly different ways of handling with drones. There are manufacturers who are delivering cheaper systems to counter drones. Anti-drone systems are at the market as well. So this would be always the entire range of capabilities. So we have to be flexible in our responses. And it is, of course, the question of not only military capabilities, but also the civilian protection system and non-military aspects of comprehensive security. The entire situation in Lithuania sparked some debate why the population was not informed about the danger, why only several leading figures from the government and parliament were protected and took down to shelters. So this is a question of our civilian preparedness. And of course, warning systems, alerts, and especially in some bigger cities, sheltering systems. So how to protect Lithuanian or Polish or Latvian or Estonian population in case of such an airspace incursion. And it is worth noting as well regarding the Baltic air policing and the entire mission that it scrambles on a regular basis to escort Russian airplanes. But the breaching of the airspace of the Baltic states is a rather rare occurrence. It happens most frequently in the Gulf of Finland, where Russians are flying along Estonian airspace.
All right, thank you so much for breaking all of that down. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Ukraine is ramping up its defense spending. The country's parliament has approved a major increase in military funding for 2025.
Ukraine's parliament has given initial approval to a nearly $10 billion boost in defense spending. The finance ministry says the move will raise the total defense budget to around $50 billion, about 26% of the country's GDP. The defense ministry stands to receive the largest share, over $7 billion, mainly for military salaries. The Interior Ministry and other security agencies, including military intelligence and the security service, will also see significant increases. Officials say the funds will help Ukraine buy more weapons, ammunition and equipment. Military intelligence, which has carried out sabotage missions inside Russia, and the security service, known for drone strikes like Operation Spiderweb, are among the key beneficiaries. To cover the costs, Ukraine plans to raise more revenue through taxes and domestic bonds. While 2025's budget needs are met, the government warns it will need over $40 billion in foreign aid for 2026.
A top Russian university is launching a new master's program focused on international sanctions, or rather how to circumvent them. One might say it's a sign of how deeply sanctions are reshaping Russia's academic and economic landscape.
Moscow's highest school of economics is introducing a 2-year master's program dedicated to sanctions compliance, the first of its kind in Russia. The course aims to train specialists who can help companies navigate the growing web of international restrictions. The program will teach students how to assess sanctions risks and ensure corporate compliance. Tuition is over $6,000 a year, with most seats reserved for Russian citizens. A shorter online course will also run this fall, offering practical case studies and legal training.
The International Monetary Fund is praising Uzbekistan's economic reforms, but says more work is needed. The country is aiming for World Trade Organization membership, but it's not there yet.
Uzbekistan's economy is growing fast, averaging nearly 6% a year under President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. The International Monetary Fund says reforms have boosted investments, cut poverty, and attracted foreign capital. Key changes include currency liberalization, price deregulation, and trade reforms. But the IMF warns that state-owned enterprises and banks still dominate the economy, limiting private sector growth. Youth unemployment remains high at 11%, and the country's debt has climbed to over $68 billion, half of its sovereign. The IMF says Uzbekistan must now focus on reducing state control, improving governance, and aligning banking rules with global standards.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.